Hey everybody, in today's lesson we're going to be learning about quadrilaterals. The prefix that you see right here in quadrilaterals means 4. So a quadrilateral is going to be talking about any shape with 4 sides. Now I want to remind you guys what it means to be a polygon. Quadrilaterals are defined as polygons because they are closed shapes with straight edges. All right, guys, make sure you guys have your notebooks out ready to take notes. We're going to start off with some very important geometry vocabulary. So the first word I want to talk about is congruent. Congruent means equal or exactly the same. And when we're talking about congruent, it could either be with angle measures or it could be with side lengths. The next word is pair. A pair is a set or group of 2 items. So when we're talking about pairs, we'll most oftentimes be talking about sides or angles. The next word is adjacent. Adjacent means 2 sides that are touching or are next to each other. Oops, please excuse my typing. Next, we're going to talk about opposite. This is referring to 2 sides that are across from each other. And when we're talking about opposite sides, we're often talking about how they are parallel, which means lines or sides that go the same direction and will never touch. So some examples of what parallel means, if I draw them right here on the screen, we're going to talk about 2 lines that if they were to continue across, they're never going to touch. Some little symbols that you might see are those arrows. If you see those on sides of a shape, it means that those sides are parallel. When we're talking about congruent sides, for example, excuse my human hair there. Oh, those are pretty bad. Let's pretend like those were the exact same size. You might see some little dashes on those lines indicating that they are the same size. The first kind of quadrilateral that I want to talk to you guys about today is called a kite. And when we're going to be talking about this shape, there's going to be a lot of vocabulary words that you really need to make sure that you are aware of. Okay? So one of the first words that describes a kite is that it has adjacent sides congruent. Adjacent means touching. So as you see, these 2 sides touch right there at that vertice, and they are congruent. Congruent means that they have the same length. These bottom sides right here are also congruent, and they are also adjacent, and they meet down there at that bottom vertice. A kite is a very special kind of quadrilateral. It's one of the only quadrilaterals that we talk about that does not have any parallel sides. In our next shape, we're going to be talking about parallel sides. Hey guys, the second kind of quadrilateral that I want to talk to you guys about today is called a trapezoid. As you can see, a trapezoid does have 4 sides, therefore it is a quadrilateral. And trapezoids have 1 set of parallel sides. Those little arrows that I just drew tell the reader that those 2 lines are parallel. If you don't know what parallel means that if these lines were to continue, they would never touch. The next quadrilateral we're going to talk about is called a parallelogram. As you see in the word parallelogram, we're most likely going to be talking about a shape that has parallel sides, since you see that word right there in its name. So a parallelogram is a type of quadrilateral that has 2 sets of opposite sides, parallel, so they're not going to touch, and congruent. Because they are parallel and meet at those 4 vertices, that means that the opposite sides will not ever touch and that they're going to be the same in length. A rhombus is very similar to a parallelogram. It also has opposite sides parallel. But in a rhombus, all four sides are congruent. So all four sides are going to have exactly the same length. That will also mean that opposite angles are also congruent, and that's also going to be true for the parallelogram that we just discussed. Our next shape is a rectangle. So a rectangle is a quadrilateral, therefore it has four sides, and it also meets those same qualifications as a parallelogram because opposite sides are parallel and opposite sides are congruent. However, a rectangle has four right angles. All of the vertices where the sides meet will meet at exactly 90 degrees, which is the definition of right angles. The last shape that we're going to talk about today is going to be a square. So in a square, it also has opposite sides parallel. And very similar to a rhombus, it has all four sides congruent. So all four sides are going to have exactly the same length. But unlike a rhombus, it has four right angles. I hope that you guys learned a lot about the different kinds of quadrilaterals and their attributes. I do want to kind of remind you what the word attribute means. An attribute is very similar to a characteristic that you might describe a person, like a person that has brown hair or blonde hair or red hair is a characteristic of that person. So when we're talking about attributes of quadrilaterals, we're talking about certain characteristics that they have to have in order to have that name. So now I want all of you guys to log on to Google Classroom. Make sure you post any questions. They can be public posts about the questions unless you want it just to go to me. And I'll make sure to answer those questions in class. Then I want you guys to go on Google Classroom and answer the 5 questions to see if you understood the different attributes of each quadrilateral.